球しようぜ。
オッケー。
セガと三四郎。
セガと三四郎。
セガサターンShiro.
Welcome to Sega Saturn Shiro, the only podcast that'll give you a
Rolling Star.
I'm Patrick.
I'm Dave.
I'm Kay.
So tonight's episode, we're going to talk about, as you probably heard before, racing games. And are you guys excited?
Oh yeah, this one's been a long time coming.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah, I mean, we might have tried to do this maybe 3 or 4 times before.
Yeah.
This maybe. But
Yeah.
now we're here. We're going to get you some racing game discussions, give you some recommendations. All right, so before we get into the racing games, why don't we talk a little bit about what we've been up to? Did you want to start, Dave?
Not much since the last podcast. Just did like a collection video update for a couple of the groups. I've been working way too much, like real work, 9 to 5. And then my kid is playing t-ball now, so just, life stuff. But I'm excited to be back with you guys doing another podcast.
That's awesome, man. I'm glad your kid's getting out there and playing the t-ball. Next thing you know, he'll be the next Yogi Berra.
Yeah, he's been playing too much Sega Saturn with his dad, so it'd be good for him to get some running in.
All right, what about you, Kay? What have you been up to?
A lot of Zelda. I know, like, our fan base or, our listeners are going to sit there and just go, what? But I've been spending a lot of time with my daughter, and we've been playing through Breath of the Wild. And we also did, like, a no-sword run on the original Legend of Zelda.
Wow.
Today, my daughter actually, she's 5. She, turned 5 a week ago or so. She actually beat the first 2 shrines in Breath of the Wild on her own. No help from me at all.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Your daughter's better than me at gaming.
Oh, there's the hope. Yeah. So, but that's really just about it. Nothing else I want to start disclosing yet because I don't want to jinx it.
I gotcha. I've been up to a little bit. I've got a new Saturn. I got
right.
I got the white Japanese version Saturn with a nice little controller and all the little connections with it, and it's really cool. I was playing with it a little bit, and I love the opening jingle to that one. I think it's probably one of the best compared to the US jingles. I mean, what do you guys think?
I like it, but I'm as far as BIOS intros are concerned, hands down the best one for Saturn. The High Saturn. Yeah, it's just no comparison.
I gotcha. I would definitely like to get a High Saturn, but I had to compromise with a white Saturn because I didn't have the money to drop on a High Saturn.
How's that screen coming, Kay? Did you manage to...
The thing I don't want to jinx.
The thing you don't want to jinx, okay.
Yeah.
That'll be next podcast. We'll discuss that. Hopefully.
We'll see.
Hopefully.
The stars align.
Right? What else you got going on, Pat?
But besides that, I ordered the Panzer Dragoon Saga on vinyl, so I'm kind of excited to get that. For those of you that don't know, I collect a lot of records, so I've been trying to get more of them, especially on the video game soundtrack space. But it's been pretty difficult, especially some of the ones that are super rare. But I think my collection's coming out pretty nicely.
The new Resurrection album, you ordered that?
Yeah, I put in a pre-order. It was about $35, but I think it was really worth it, and I'm kind of excited. Usually I don't like to sort of rearrange soundtracks, but since the original composer's on board, it's like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
So, that's about it. So, why don't we go into some of the news section?
For sure.
Now that you know what's new with us, let's talk about what's new with the Saturn.
So the first thing that I don't know if it's ready for announcement yet, but Dave and I were privy to some information about Netlink compatibility for Sega Touring Car. Some big things happened, I think, literally today, right, Dave?
Yeah, we got some news from Zayden over on the Dreamcast Talk forums. Did you want to detail what we found out?
No, I'll let you do that, man. That's some pretty awesome stuff, and it's for a game that I didn't even know was Netlink compatible in any way, shape, or form. This is kind of your baby.
Sega Touring Car Championship. It's one of my guilty pleasures, and I only say guilty because it's kind of a maligned game by some. It's a punishing difficulty, and it wasn't developed by the AM2 or AM3 team. It was like the AM Annex, so it's a love or hate for some, but it's been a love of mine for several years. Used to play it as a teenager, and so just by my proximity to the game and knowing a lot about it, I knew that it had Netlink compatibility, even though it's not listed on Wikipedia or Sega Retro or Satakore or any of the other sites that list Netlink compatibility. They don't speak to the fact that Sega Touring Car has compatibility with the Netlink. Now, it doesn't have direct dial, you can't dial up another person and play them head to head, but what you can do is you can submit high scores to a worldwide leaderboard. So that was always really cool, and the fact that it uses the system clock to know where you are in the world. And then back in the day, of course, you could go onto the website and you could look at the scores, but you could actually submit the scores from your Saturn just with the dial-up modem. So Zayden over at the Dreamcast Talk forums has actually figured out how to get that functionality back online, and also get Saturn sending and receiving emails, which is going to be real cool too. So, and you can do that with you do the email functionality with a Dream Pi, correct? Okay.
Yeah. From what I remember reading, for this specific game, you'll need a Dream Pi to be able to send that email off. And the scores are now able to be sent off. But also, the thing that I saw, and Dave, please correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like we can actually go back to using the Netlink to send, each other, us who use Netlinks, save data.
Correct.
That was, wow.
Yeah.
That's news to me, right?
We're going to be able to. So people order your Dream Pis. They're self-contained. There's no setup involved. You can order a Dream Pi to use with your Netlink modem, and it sounds like we're gonna be able to send and receive emails between Saturns, which means yes, you're gonna be able to send and receive save data among who knows what else, what other kind of potential this holds. We're talking to Zayden and we're trying to explore the possibilities, but it sounds real cool.
I'm already loading up my chain letters to spam to all my friends on my friends list. It's going to be a sweet proposition.
Yeah, so any kind of internet browsing, emailing, that kind of thing you're going to be doing with the Dream Pi. And then, of course, online matchups are still going to be done with the VoIP adapter.
So then potentially you will be needing 2 different adapters then, right?
For now. Joe, or Sega RPG fan, he did mention that if somebody comes along who has some coding skill and is interested in writing like a Linux-based Pi program for making that possible, then maybe we won't need the VoIP adapter in the future, and maybe latency will be even better. Who knows? But as it is right now, the VoIP adapter is the best thing we have. It sounds to me though like things in this community move pretty fast, and that's one of the reasons why this podcast is taking this so seriously. I mean, I know it sounds kind of like a niche thing maybe, but if we help get the news out there, maybe this message will reach a talented coder out there who's interested in bringing their efforts to the community and making this happen. So
Geez, at the rate that all these Saturn hacks and mods are coming along, I think we're going to know the system more than the original designers will at one point.
Mm-hmm. I think that the scene is actually getting more in touch with like the inner workings of the Saturn. And of course, like James Lairdwall, his discoverings, his findings have really helped the emulation scene get better. And he's fed them a lot of information as we come to find out more and more of like how just the inner workings of the Saturn and the architecture. I can't imagine there's too many people out there that want to read through all of that documentation, because there is a lot of documentation. I have posted up in PDFs on the Sega Saturn archive, and even I don't want to read all of it. It's like huge, thick manuals, but there are people out there that like doing that kind of thing, so I always stand in awe of those kind of people, especially like Zaiden.
Man, the next step we have is getting CDs manufactured with that wobble in it that are burnable.
Most of this stuff happened for Dreamcast first, just because it was so much more open and like easy. But with the Saturn, it's kind of like we've had to go back after the fact, and maybe the increased effort is just because it's becoming more of a mainstream awareness kind of thing. People are becoming more aware of the Saturn, just like you didn't know that it existed at some point, and then you started discovering it. As it becomes discovered and more mainstream, hopefully the talent will come, and people will start putting their effort into this console.
I agree completely. I think this is going to be it's an interesting time to live in for the Saturn, and I'm very happy to be in this day and age because it's just getting better and better.
And speaking of getting better, so are we. The Shiro team is growing and getting better, and we have news for you guys.
So over the recent couple months, we noticed that it's been getting harder and harder to get regular content out to you guys. As we're only 3 guys and 2 of us have children, it's been very difficult sometimes to get regular content, especially with some of the delays we've been having in the recent times. So we decided to bring on a couple new members. Our first new member being Peter Malik, who's been really renowned in the community with a lot of the content he puts out there on the various groups on Facebook and a lot of his writing. Unfortunately, could not be here today. Maybe you can talk a little bit about him, Dave?
Yeah, well, like we said briefly in the last cast, Peter's just a great guy. He's very active on the Saturn groups on Facebook. I know he's an avid Nights into Dreams fan. He actually holds the highest record. He knows that game inside and out, but it turns out he also knows quite a bit about a lot of other Saturn games, Saturn hardware. He's got an amazing collection. Super nice gentleman, and lives up in Canada, so he'll be a Canadian correspondent, brother from the north, and it'll be fun. He's going to bring a lot of knowledge and a lot of passion for this console to the group.
We're very excited to have him on. And another member that unfortunately could not be here tonight was Natalie. And would you be willing to do the introductions, Kay?
Yeah. So Natalie has been pretty active in a lot of the gaming groups. Primarily, I've actually known her probably for about 6 months or so, maybe more, from an Xbox modification group that I'm part of. And she has joined up with the Saturn groups in full force. I think she was recently made a moderator and admin for the Junkyard.
Yeah.
She is a very skilled modder. Does a lot of pretty detailed soldering work, and very approachable as well. So wanted to have her join up with us to look to get in some guides and tutorial videos about how you can mod your own Saturn rather than having to send it off to someone else. Get you comfortable around a soldering iron.
Yes, and definitely avoid all those hot glue modders you see all over eBay that just fill your system up with it instead of solder.
Hot glue mess.
Just a hot mess.
Yeah.
Alright, so now that we introduced both Peter and Natalie, let's the rest of the guys were able to make it on, so I'd like to introduce them and let them talk a little bit. The first person I'd like to talk about is Claire. So you want to introduce yourself a little bit, Claire?
Sure. Hi, guys. I am super excited to be here. I am from Pennsylvania, and I have a pretty specific interest in Panzer Dragoon. And that's really what drove me in recent months to become more active within the Saturn community on Facebook. And that's how I really got to know Dave and Pat, and now everyone else that's here with us.
Yeah. So what is your experience with the Saturn? What got you interested in the Saturn?
During the Saturn's lifetime, I was actually completely oblivious to its existence. Like I said, I'm from the countryside. I've lived here my whole life, and we didn't really have any stores around here in my area that so much as carried any video games. So I didn't know that the Saturn existed until the internet came to my area in the early 2000s, and I was Google searching things, and I came across this game called Nights into Dreams, and I saw that it was on the Saturn. And I had never in my life heard or seen of this console. No advertising on TV, no print advertisements or anything like that. So that's what originally sparked my interest in getting into the system.
Cool.
We're going to have a couple more questions to ask Claire and everyone else who's in here. Let's go ahead and introduce our new video correspondent. Chaz, are you with us?
I'm right here.
Why don't you go ahead and tell our listeners who you are?
Well, everyone listening, hello. My name is Chaz. I believe I'm one of the newer, I don't know if I'm the newest, but when I was offered the gig to join this podcast, I got very excited, of course, not knowing the first thing about how to connect with people and speak to them live over the internet, per se. So my story goes back to the late 90s, believe it or not, when the Saturn was still alive, when it was still trying to fight the good fight in the market. And I had played a handful of games over at my cousin's place. He was a Sega consumer, so he had a Genesis, he had a Sega CD add-on. I think he may have even had a 32X at one point. And he had the Saturn later on. And I played a lot of Virtua Fighter Remix and Virtua Fighter 2 over at his house. And believe it or not, one of the games that I did get to play when it was still on the market was the sought-after Guardian Heroes, when you could still buy it on retail. I was fortunate enough to play that at a video game store that had TV set up in the back room where you could rent them for an hour or an hour and a half, and for like a few dollars at a time, just play the games for as long as you like, because it generated good revenue for that store, which unfortunately is not there anymore. It's just now a thing of my past. But then time moved on, and I, like most people, I went the PlayStation route. And looking back at it in retrospect, it was a good choice on my part because of the horrible fate, the absolute horrible campaign that the Saturn suffered, particularly here in the United States. But the other game that got me the most mystified, which mystified a lot of other people, I imagine, was Panzer Dragoon Saga. The one mystifying game, this legendary Japanese RPG that nobody had played. Because unless you were in line to get it at Toys R Us, April 30th, 1998, if you weren't lucky enough to get a copy when it first came out, the likelihood is you missed it. Because Sega only shipped so many copies, maybe around 20,000, just to cut their financial losses. So that mystified me. And I heard it from a friend of mine on a school bus. I said, "What is this game you're talking about?" Panzer Dragoon Saga. What is that? And he says, "Oh my God, you got to play it. It's effing amazing." He was quite ecstatic about it, and for years it eluded me. And eventually, I said to myself around 2005, 2006, you know what? I want to start playing those games. I've never touched that console. I want to know more about it. I've got to know more about it. And I started with Dragonforce, which I got as a Christmas present in 2006, and that made me quite the happy boy on Christmas morning. And then later, I eventually dropped the money to buy a copy of Saga because I really, really wanted to play it. Didn't want to be without it. And at the time, emulation on the Saturn was really shoddy. So when I put it in my console and was about to boot it up, I said to myself, "Oh my God, I can't believe I'm about to play this. This is unreal." What got me hooked was that opening intro video, all the flashing scenes, all the cutscenes, and that drumming music that accompanies the video cutscene behind it. I said to myself, "Whoa, I am in for something special, something that I cannot recreate from any game ever." And I was right. I was right when I played it all the way through. And the rest is pretty much history at this point. I'm sorry if I took up too much time explaining all that.
No, that's great.
For listeners who might not be aware, one of the reasons that we've had our eye on Chaz was a fantastic tutorial that he had posted for playing Dragonforce. And recently, you guys may have noticed, Chaz has been doing a playthrough of Panzer Dragoon Saga with the goal of 100%ing it, correct?
I did it once, I'm going to do it again.
It's fantastic. So the last member that we have here with us tonight is Dave number 2, David Hickman.
Hi there. I answer to Dave, David, hey you, but most people just go by Hickman, especially since everybody knows all of us Daves are just clones anyway, and I work with like 5 others, so the last name works a lot better.
Give up our secret.
These are the days I know. These are the days I know.
So I got into Saturn quite by accident. I was a Genesis kid for a while. In fact, I got my first Genesis because my mother would not let me buy a Game Boy. She thought that the tiny screen was a waste of time. So I got my Genesis. I started playing Shining Force really heavily. I loved that game. I still do. And I was over at Buddy's house, and he was just showing me this brand new game called Final Fantasy VII. And I'd never actually played any other Final Fantasies before that, so this was kind of a big deal. And my other friend comes over and goes, dude, you gotta check this out! And he sets up this Saturn, and he fires it up, and it's Shining Force 3. Here's my favorite series ever, in 3D. I was freaking out, drooling on it. We played it for hours that day. The next day I called around, found the literal last Saturn that was being sold in Roseburg in a Walmart. Drove down there. My car's brakes failed 3/4 of the way, but damn it, I really wanted this, so I finished driving without brakes. Kids don't do this at home. Got to Walmart, bought it, and then called my dad to come pick me up because the car was broke.
Did that Walmart have a garage at the time?
No, they did not.
No,
so
that,
You're like,
sorry to interrupt. That is determination. Heck,
That's
that
right.
is determination right there.
So I get it home, I play it, I beat it. I find out that the US release of Shining Force 3 was only the first disc, which, while still enjoyable, was kind of disappointing. And so I was hell-bent on learning Japanese to finish the next 2 discs. Fast forward a few years later, I meet Kay, we're talking about Saturns. I'm like, yeah, dude, I gotta learn Japanese so I can beat this. He goes, well, we could just mod your Saturn. And yeah, I've been in love ever since. So now I've got my very happily modded Saturn, I've got my English translated discs, and everything is great.
I was just gonna ask, that was English translated, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought so. I couldn't remember. I couldn't get my facts straight on that.
But yeah,
So-
that's a little bit about me, I guess.
Nice.
Yeah, I've known Dave Hickman. God, it's been over 10 years now.
I think it'll be 10 years this June. But yeah, it's been a little while.
Yeah.
And where are you located, Dave?
We're outside of Portland, Oregon. I'm like
Oh, okay.
3 blocks from Kay's house.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Scappoose?
Mhm.
Okay.
And so most of our listeners won't see or hear much from Dave. You know, he's always welcome to drop in, of course. But primarily, there's been a lot of Saturn projects that he and I have worked on over the years, and we're going to bring a lot of that to the Shiro brand. So,
Seriously,
That'd be
after that
awesome.
story, I hope we do hear more from him.
yeah. Well, Dave, you want to? It's always open, but Dave
Put him on the spot.
Yeah.
Well,
You're gonna join
talking-
us, right?
Talking has never been my problem, that's for sure. It's more a matter of wrangling all 4 of my kids. I don't always have a whole lot of time for other things.
I hear you.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
I gotcha.
thanks for showing up for this one. So next on our agenda, I went out and I reached out to Retrobit regarding the Sega Saturn licensed controllers that they're making, and I wanted to ask them. They're putting out some great-looking controllers with great functionality, but strangely missing to me was the 3D controller or any 3D controller accessories. I don't know if any of you guys have had problems with your 3D controllers, but we ran a tournament for Nights into Dreams last year at Calit's Gamers for Kids, and one of the most difficult aspects of running that tournament was preparing with 3D controllers for everybody that had no issues. That cable is detachable from that controller, and I found probably about 3 or 4 controllers that would work perfectly fine as long as the cable was good. So I reached out to them, and they gave me a very canned response, but they're still apparently working on getting the street date for the existing controllers and hope to expand further on their product line. So here's hoping that Retrobit is able to maybe make some new cables for those old controllers, the 3D controllers, or maybe even give us like a new.
So my question is, with Nights in the Dreams, how many buttons does it actually require to function? Like that are actually used on the controller?
Dave, go for this.
Well, you got your analog stick, and then you got your shoulder bumpers for R and L, and then just a dash button. I think, yeah, because if you do, it's basically like left and right combos. Press them at the same time to air brake. One or the other would make him do like tricks and stuff like that. So I think it's just one of the face buttons, like the A, B, or C. They all do the same thing, dash.
So Retrobit is also coming out with a wireless Dreamcast controller and adapter.
Gotcha. Okay.
So since it's Bluetooth as well, my thinking was that you'd be able to hook it up to that Bluetooth adapter on the Saturn and use that as a 3D controller for the games that could support it. But Kay brought up a very interesting point last podcast where the Retrobit controller, because the Saturn has 8 buttons, while the Dreamcast only has 6. But my thinking was if the game doesn't require that many buttons, that it could potentially be playable using a Dreamcast controller in the 3D controller's place. Because I mean, while it can't be wired, I think with Bluetooth, the way that Bluetooth is now and all those retro adapters, especially with the 8-bit DOE ones, I think that the Dreamcast would probably be very useful to use as the 3D controller on the Saturn for now, of course, until they maybe come out with one.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. They're probably going to base any future releases off of sales, so
yeah,
they're just going to have to track that.
Yeah, and I'll definitely try that out once I get the adapters once that's released, and we'll figure out what we can do if I'm able to connect that. And I'll try to play that with Knights to see if that would work.
Cool.
So I just want to thank all our new Shiro members. Everyone that talked, they brought really good insight. And personally, I'm really excited to see what content they bring us, either through the forums, the Facebook, or on video on our YouTube channel. So yeah. So now excited. Let's move on to our obscure game of the cast, which is going to be Choro Q Park. So, for those of you that don't know, this is a racing game, surprise, surprise, where you're this little toy car, and I guess you are in this competition of some sort, and you basically get to... it's kind of hard to describe. It's all in Japanese, so I don't know what's going on, but...
May I?
Yeah, go for it.
Well, okay. Choro Q Park, subtitle Penny Racers. I don't know if anybody remembers when they were a kid, there were these little cars that you could buy at the grocery store, like 3 or 5 in a pack. You wind them up, and you stick a penny in to make them go, and they would do like little wheelies and stuff like that. Well, those were made by a Japanese toy company called Takara, and Takara made a lot of toys. They also got into the video game business and decided to make a video game based on these penny racers because they were extremely popular in Japan because they're chibi and they're cute, and so they were hugely popular in Japan. So they made this game, this racing game, and I believe it was Next Tech that was the developer. And so so that's what this is all about. But it's kind of like you got the garage, and then you got little events that you can race in and stuff like that, and you get a driver's license. I was trying to do kind of like, this was pre-Gran Turismo though, so, but kind of the same kind of thing. Did you notice that, Pat?
Yeah, I really love the feel of the game. I know that's going to be kind of weird to say, but
because Kay didn't like the feel. That's something he commented on.
Yeah, I mean, that one of the things that I liked actually was the shoulder button gear shift.
Yes.
I know that some of the games actually didn't have that. I think it was Need for Speed that didn't, but I kind of really loved the gear shifts, the way that it worked.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually like the feel of this one. I thought it was a really fun racer. And
it has a really tight turning. Did you notice that? Like,
yeah,
that have the
definitely tight turning.
It
Exactly.
reminded me of Mario Kart, like the Mode 7 original Mario Kart, where like when you're going really fast on the 100cc races, you were in like Bowser's Castle, you get those sharp edges, and you really have to kind of like time your turn. Yeah, it's an interesting feel for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and you didn't even mention the coolest feature is that you can actually have multiple cars that are that you can use for different racing situations.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, you can use one car for the street racing, and once you get to the dirt road, you can actually set it to switch out to an off-roading type car to have better performance on that track.
Exactly.
So I thought that was a really neat feature that I've never seen in any other game before. I thought it really made the game a lot of fun.
Well, Kate, were you saying that you kind of felt lost in this game?
So, we'll probably get this at some point. I mean, it's on my list for more of a technical reason than a gameplay reason. But while I was playing it, I felt the racing aspect of it didn't feel like it had any speed or momentum to it during that first section. And that initial, when you first start playing a game, unless you're already invested in the series in some way, shape, or form, if those opening 10 to 15 minutes of gameplay don't grab you, it's really difficult for me anyway, to continue on. And I was I got into actually driving the vehicles, and I just didn't feel it at all. I felt no sense of motion or speed. So yeah, I mean, I felt momentum in games like RC Pro-Am, and I was kind of expecting a little similar kind of a feel to that, or maybe like Mario Kart. I just didn't get it.
I hear you. I kind of got hooked by the graphic, like the artistic style of it, and it's very stylized. It's very Japanese. The box art, that's kind of what hooked me in. But I know what you're saying. Like, it took me a lot longer to get really into it than just like 10 or 20 minutes. So I can understand what you mean. And also, those menus are kind of weird to navigate. I had to like get on a FAQ, so I could just kind of get right to where I needed to be.
I ran into that same issue where I didn't know what I was doing, and I kept trying to select these cars over and over again. But one of the places I found actually had a guide on how to navigate the menus, so I was going to include that into the show notes. So if you guys had the same issue where I did, where you had to go through these menus and you didn't realize you had to complete these training missions to be able to actually race, I'll just include that into the show notes, and you guys could just use that. And it'll be a lot easier than trying to hunt down a guide.
Yeah, it's very possible that Kay was actually playing the training mission.
Oh, yeah, I completely believe that.
So that was one of the biggest issues. So we'll include that into our guide. And do you guys have any closing notes on the game?
People should burn a copy and play it, or emulate it and check it out. Because I think it's a good game that's pretty easy to recommend. It's got a lot of features. It's got a lot of content in there. What do you think, Pat?
I think it's a really solid 6-7 out of 10 game. It's nothing really special to write home about. I did like the soundtrack, and it was pretty fun and unique. But if you don't know Japanese, you're gonna be stumbling through it a ton.
For me, the technical reason why I'm interested in this game is that the Satakore version is one of the more rare discs in the Saturn library.
So what's so special about that one?
Just very limited print run.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
So there are multiple releases of the Choro Q?
There's like the standard release and then the Saturn collection of Satakore version.
Okay.
So the normal release is all over eBay. I mean, you can pick it up for less than $25. I'm looking at like 5 or 6 different listings. And odd thing enough, this game has been on my alerts for eBay for years because of the rarity of the Satakore version.
Nice. Well, I hope you're able to grab that and we can get another good rip of that.
Yeah, I think that's our obscure game of the cast.
So now let's move on to our main topic, which is, of course, the racing games, and we're going to be burning up the tires on this one. So since there's a large amount of racing games for the Saturn, more than I actually thought there would be, we're probably going to break this up into maybe a couple episodes. So why don't we sort of talk about our experience with this with the genre of racing on the Saturn.
So Simon over at the Saturn Junkyard, he started issuing a bunch of racing game challenges in the new year, and I'd been following along and kind of enjoying some of these challenges. And we had VR Virtua Racing. We had one for there was one for Sega Rally. There was one for Sega Touring Car. So quite a few, and that led us to say, well, with all the playing of racing games, we ought to get into doing a cast for it and covering. But what we found is that there are so many racing games on the Saturn, like Pat said, we have to cut it up. And so we're going to talk about some of the major heavy hitters, and there were many. Saturn was definitely a racing game console. I mean, if it was anything, a lot of great shooters, a lot of great RPGs, but also a lot of great racing games. And did we want to start with a particular one, Pat?
Yeah, why don't we start off with the undisputably probably one of the best ones on the Saturn, which is, of course, Daytona USA.
Okay, so it's not my absolute favorite, but it is a great one, and it's also the first racing game that came out on the Saturn. It was a launch title.
And of course, it's the arcade port of the same name, Daytona USA, that came out in arcades, and unfortunately the first release was plagued with a few frame rate problems and drawing distance issues, which for some people kind of made it seem like the Saturn had a weakness of sorts.
Yeah, I mean, I remember even back in the day, my little brother and I popping it in, and it was bittersweet. Like, we could definitely tell with the pop-in that it didn't perform the same way as like Ridge Racer on the PlayStation. The graphics left a little bit to be desired, but when you actually got in and started playing it, and you discovered the drift mechanic, and the music was great, and you could be a horse, that was kind of cool with a code, and there was that's the other thing, there was so many like hidden codes and things you could do. It kind of won us over. What they were able to do was capture that same like arcade racing feel. And so that came over intact. And that's one of those things that Sega, I think, did a lot, is even if they had to compromise on the graphics, they were usually able to bring over the essence of a game, through the gameplay and the feel of it.
We bring the arcade experience home, is what they once said.
That's right.
As many people know, Daytona USA has had many incarnations, with there being the regular version, the Circuit Edition, and the Champion Circuit Edition. The Champion Circuit Edition was originally released in the United States, and it had better frame rate and it ran a little bit better, but unfortunately it had the issue with removing the original soundtrack from the game itself. which, well, some people could maybe understand it. I personally really think that really brought that version down. And personally, I didn't really want to bother with it. But then I learned that they released in Japan the Circuit Edition, which actually has all those fixes, and using the Sega Rally engine on top of the choice between the alternate and the original music. And that you can actually set the music to the original tracks that you want to play it on. So, definitely, in my opinion, I think the Circuit Edition, the Japanese version, has to be the definite version to get if you want to play this game.
And I have to disagree with you. I think the only thing that I really like about the Championship Circuit Edition or Netlink is the improved draw-in, and just the graphics look a little bit smoother frame rate. I'm not a fan of the Sega Rally controls on Daytona. It makes it a different game for me. It doesn't really control the same way. I love Sega Rally. It is my top racing game on the Saturn, but I definitely find myself playing the original more, just because I like that classic Daytona feel, and I feel like they kind of threw that out. So I mean, it just doesn't come over the same with the Sega Rally engine, personally.
Would you say that all the lagging bugginess is worth it just for the experience?
You know, the thing is, when you start overtaking cars and you're making perfect drifts, you're not even looking into the distance for pop-up. You know, you're engaged. And the music it's just, I feel like the first game to me is the closest experience to what we had in the arcades. The Championship Circuit Editions is like a new beast, you know, and the cars do look a little bit better, but I don't know. I'll still take the first one for sure.
What are your thoughts, Kay?
Well, I've never played the Japanese Circuit Edition, but in doing research for a previous episode, that was the most networkable version of the game, and that makes me very interested, you know, because it works with both the Tyson cable for head-to-head in room, as well as the X-band modem, which, you know, if that, you know, world comes, you know, back into fruition, that networking for the Japanese X-band, you know, it'll open up a whole world of online Saturn, and that's a heck of a lot cheaper to pick up if you want to, you know, collect only original discs than the US Netlink edition.
Oh yeah.
How much is the Netlink edition running for?
Oh, the US Netlink edition?
Yeah.
I know that I think Collectors of America a week or two ago was trying to sell a disc-only version, where they had reproed the supplement manual, and they wanted somewhere in the realm of like $1,300 to $1,600 for it.
Oh my gosh!
I know of a local person in the Portland general area who has a copy that he had found for $10 at $10 to $20 at a GameStar, so like a chain of retro retail stores. And he's trying to sell that one for anywhere between $1,300 and $2,000.
That is insane.
Yeah,
really.
That's like a price of a used car.
Kay needs that disc.
Oh god, I have the supplement too. I have an original copy, of, like an original supplement manual, but just that disc has eluded me for years.
Maybe you can trade your High Saturn for it.
Ha 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 ha! You're funny looking. Oh wait,
I got a zinger for you coming up.
I know you do. I saw it in the text there, but I actually hate to admit this. I agree with Dave. Like, I've tried.
You don't have to hate to admit it.
I have to hate to admit this because, so, being a fan of Rally, even though I'm terrible at that game, like the idea behind having like the engine ported over, you know, to improve, like that was their original purpose, was to improve this game, and not actually having it really feel like it improved. I'd throw in the first Daytona. God, the first pictures I had with my Mega View, like my big screen CRT, were with Castlevania, right? So Nocturne of the Middle of the Night or Game of the Night, and Daytona USA. Like all my screenshots from that were from those two games. I really like Daytona USA original. I can't really say much else to it.
Yeah, it's not that bad, really. I mean, it's one of those, and here's the thing. Why would you want a rally engine for stock cars? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. And I know that the Japanese version also added 3D pad support. I mean, but I just prefer the D-pad anyway. I mean, I can rock at that game with the D-pad. But that's not to say, like, okay, if a burned copy of the Netlink one though, I'm not going to spend $1,200 on that game. But a burned copy of the Netlink means I can play K over VoIP, and so that's an added feature that definitely gives it a lot of value for me. So there are so many things that are in the CCE camp as far as good things. So I think they're both great to have. But as far as just the original arcade Daytona experience, for me, it's the original.
All right, so why don't we move on to our next game, which is going to be Sega Rally Championships. Speaking of the Sega Rally engine,
what a phenomenal game! I dare say it's a perfect game. I have a hard time finding, with the original Sega Rally Championship, I have a hard time finding any fault with it. And I don't hold graphics against it because, of course, over 23 years on, that's forgivable. But what do you think? What do you guys think, Sega Rally?
I'm going to probably get a lot of hate for this, but I actually didn't really like it. I thought the handling was really strange on the cars. I thought, I don't know, I wasn't really a big fan of the gameplay of it. The fact that it defaults you to the first person really threw off my perspective, and I don't know, I wasn't a fan of the handling of the cars.
But you can kick out the back and you can kind of just hold that drift around a really long turn, and then when you hit dirt from asphalt, there's like a different feeling to it. And when I don't know, when you overtake a car and you like bump into them, and there's just like, when you go over jumps, like there's so much dynamics in that game. Like it just for me, I don't know, it just feels so perfect, and then the music is like excellent, right, Kay?
Yeah, I mean, as we talked about in like the first episode, and we brought this up a couple times, this game is a classic, and I'm horrid at it, and I still enjoy this game. I would say that I put Daytona in more often than Rally, but I feel that Rally was a better game across the board.
I gotcha. I really just think it just comes down to my personal preference for why I don't really care for. I'd really just take Daytona over Rally, but I mean the game isn't bad at all. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying
I know.
That the game is just, I don't know, the way that it feels in races just really isn't for me. But
AM3, they were such a talented team of coders, and they did this. They did the whole thing in assembly. That was what I was talking about before, like that raw coding talent. They didn't have the Sega graphic library yet, and they really just literally had to get all the physics, the graphics, everything programmed by hand, basically, knowing the system architecture. And so, I mean, to create something like that, I played the arcade version. I actually enjoy the Saturn version more, and I might get flamed for that. But
wow,
yeah, I know. I mean, okay, aside from the cabinet, being able to sit down in that cabinet is of course an awesome experience. But the Saturn, that's a game that keeps giving. I mean, I've been playing over 20 years now, and it's such a great game.
How does it actually stack up to the arcade version of it?
Very well. I mean, I don't think. Back when it came out, I don't think anybody was complaining. I think everybody felt like it was probably the most faithful arcade port up to that point. And I mean, for a 3D game too, it exceeded expectations. Also, in hindsight, it's 2020. People back then, with Virtua Fighter being kind of a botched release, people's expectations may have been a little lower. So then when it came out, they were probably really happy with how it turned out. But I mean, even now, people still hold it in such high regard. And then there's all the other iterations, right? Plus, Netlink Edition, they did the same kind of thing, adding the Japanese version, added 3D control pad support, and then the Netlink Edition has it too.
When we
I don't know.
played, did you feel much of a difference between the original Sega Rally versus the Netlink edition?
Yeah, I realized that I didn't feel at home with it. Like, I was able to kind of adjust. Yeah, I kind of was adjusting on the fly, because it was a different physics than I was used to.
Have you given it any more playtime? Try and get used to it.
No. If I play Sega Rally, it's usually just I pop in my box copy, but that one that I was playing with you, I think was a burned copy, just because I don't actually have the Netlink version. I don't have a retail disc.
So, do you guys have any closing notes on it, or anyone else want to share any of their thoughts on it before we move on?
Yeah, I'm actually in the same boat as Pat as far as Sega Rally goes. I don't know if you'd expected that, but I'm actually with you on that, Pat. You hear me?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. What exactly do you feel about it that you agree with me on?
Basically, pretty much what happened to you. Or I don't know if my situation is worse or better than mine, but I remember popping it in, trying the same easy track several times, and I was constantly smacking into walls, misinterpreting turns, getting outlapped, and I gave it a couple more tries after that, and was getting the same result. I don't know if it's due to my play style, or if I'm doing something wrong, or the physics didn't work for me per se. I don't know exactly what the problem was, but after several failed tries, I said, forget it, this sucks, I'm not playing this again.
Yeah, you can only get so many timeouts that you just put down the game and be like, okay, I think I'm going to try another one.
But yeah, Sega Rally, I could not, for the life of me, get the hang of it and feel comfortable with it and work with it on a functional level. I said, no, forget it. I can't play this. I'm moving on. That's what happened.
I got you. I definitely with you, Chaz. I don't know. I don't hate racing games. I'm sort of in the middle about them. But just Sega Rally compared to all the others I've played, it's just one of the ones that wasn't really that fun for me. But I have another one that's definitely above it in awfulness, and that would be the Initial D game for the Sega Saturn, Kandu Saisoku Densetsu. And hopefully I said that right.
Densetsu means legend. I know you said that right.
I gotcha. Cool. So this game is awful. It's the worst racing game I've ever played. And if you play this out of anything for Initial D, I feel sorry for you, because it ruined it. You would not like Initial D if you play that game.
Yeah.
Because aren't there Initial D games out there that people really like and that are relatively popular at anime conventions and whatnot?
Yeah, those are the arcade games by Sega, but the only Initial D game ever released on the Saturn was this Densetsu game, which...
And it was not Sega that made it.
Did I say made by Sega? I meant released.
No. You were just saying that the good ones are by Sega, and they're ported by Sega too, so that's why they're good. But this one was made for the Saturn, but not by Sega. So
yeah, there's a trend going on with Initial D games not made by Sega being complete shite, and that PC game is another example of that, which is out of the scope. But the game basically just it looks like it's sort of a side story or a non-canon game where you just do random racing. It's like the first one you actually race your friend through the tracks. Like, oh hey, let's race our AE86s, or well, it is an 85, but they go through it and they do the race, and the handling's awful. The drift mechanic just had me kept running into guardrails. It felt really slippery. It didn't really seem like I couldn't really get the hang of the drift mechanic, and I just kept banging into walls. The handling was awful on it, and I just wasn't a fan of it. And the art was just awful. Like if you guys thought Season 2 was bad of Initial D, like this art makes that look good.
So let me make sure I understand this, Pat. We have a Sega racing franchise, correct?
Yeah.
We have a Sega system, the Saturn. We get one Initial D game on it, and it's complete garbage.
That's about right. Right.
How did that equation come to be?
Probably because it's an anime series, and Sega maybe thought that no one would give a shit about it.
If they gave if they gave a shit about it in arcades, wouldn't they care about it at home?
Well, I'm not sure that the arcade games were out around this time.
Yeah, I think I believe the first ones were on the Naomi arcade system, which is, for those that don't know, or is the equivalent of the Dreamcast for arcades.
So it was at home before it was in the arcades, is that right?
No, it was never at home. It was, well, this one was released, the one that's released, the arcade one's Naomi was never released on Dreamcast at all.
Okay, that's my confusion.
But see, because it's Densetsu, it's like a legend game. It's like there's like a story element with like, you know, static screens, story being told, and it's kind of a pretty different thing. No, it's not very good at all. But it's not to be confused with the arcade, like the Sega arcade experiences. This is just kind of like I don't know. It's just drudgery. And the PlayStation got a version too. The PlayStation got a version that was maybe a little bit better graphically, but wasn't much better. There's actually a better downhill drifting game on the Saturn, which was the Toge King games, right? The Spirits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, not that we're going into that, but
I need to import some more racing games too. I've been looking at a few of them.
Just don't make it this one.
Yeah, well, thank you for the input.
So any final thoughts on Initial D Disappointment Edition?
It's not Initial D for disappointment. It's Eternal D for disappointment, right?
Initial disappointment. I'll live with that.
Eternal damnation.
All right, so next up on our agenda is Sega Touring Car. And we know we touched a little bit about it in our news section. But this is Dave's baby, so take it away.
Okay, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but Sega Touring Car is a game that it was also another great arcade license. It was a great game in the arcade, but it wasn't rally racing and it wasn't stock car racing. It was kind of what is touring car? It was like this German touring circuit that happened in the mid 90s, you know. So that was a kind of interesting thing to begin with for Sega to try to turn it into an arcade game. But anyway, it had a pretty good arcade success, and then they decided to bring it to the Saturn. But at the time that it was ported, they were kind of short-staffed. They had teams working on the Panzer Dragoon series. They had teams working on, they had Sonic team working away, and AM2 team and AM3s working on their respective stuff. So they had to get the AM Annex team to work on this game, and arguably, you know, I think they did a pretty good job. They did about as good as they could do with the level of speed that they're trying to get out of this game. Because it does have like this sense of speed, but it also has a huge shortcoming, which is the frame rate. This frame rate dips down sometimes so low that you can't really get a sense of corners coming up on you until they're like right up on you, and that's bad for a racing game. So it's one of those things that's almost unforgivable. The game has a lot of great things about it, but that frame rate is probably the biggest shortcoming and the reason why people find it so difficult to play. And did you guys have anything you wanted to say about it? Or
I just wanted to ask David if I've been hovering my hand over that game back and forth, as in should I play it or should I not play it? Would you recommend it to me today, or would you hesitate?
I don't know if you would enjoy it or not. I love most of the racers on the Saturn, and the fact that it was an exclusive to the Saturn and that it was a Sega-made game, I just had to have it. And I used to play it back in the day, but the thing that I kind of discovered myself, and then I shared with the guys on the junkyard, is that you're allowed to tune the cars and modify them to make them, you know, suit your needs. And while the stock car that they give you is kind of like unruly and bangs into the walls a lot, you can have a lot of success by using certain tuning settings that I shared on the Saturn junkyard. With like Simon, and the same thing goes for a few other guys over there on the junkyard. They all reported success with those tuning settings. So I think it's ironic that they didn't just ship the game with that default setting of the cars are manageable, you know, that you can actually handle them. Because when you try to just handle the vehicle out of the box, you're just bouncing off the walls like a pinball. But anyway, I don't know if I would recommend it to you. I would say probably emulate or burn it first and try it out and see. But it's not an expensive game.
All right, so I think next on the list is Pat with Need for Speed / Nissan Overdriving GTR.
Vroom vroom. Yes, this game was. I actually had a lot of fun with it. I know a lot of people are really in the middle about this game, but I really enjoyed it. I love the just the fast-paced racing, the Metropolis street racing. I mean, it's sort of like at least in the city ones, it reminds me a lot of what I'd like for Initial D, that Initial D game, and that's what I was hoping with Initial D, but what I didn't get. I thought it was a lot of fun. Essentially, you're just picking cars, just racing them, and it's a straightforward racing game. I mean, there's not really much of a story to it. Personally, some of my favorite cars to race with that is the Acura RSX and the Mazda RX-7, which the RX-7 for Initial D, of course. I was actually kind of disappointed that that Need for Speed, the US version, didn't have any Nissans. But I actually learned that the Japanese version, that's all it has is Skylines.
Right.
It's kind of ironic because that's my favorite car. So, what about you guys? How do you guys feel about this game?
I loved it. I mean, it's a port. It came out on the 3DO first, and it was a little choppy. I mean, the graphics, the 3DO had kind of like a better filter to it. It looked a little smoother, but the frame rate was abysmal, and you didn't feel like you were actually going very fast. The Saturn version runs a lot faster, and its graphics are a little crisper. I like it a lot. It feels good.
Nice.
It's like got that cockpit view, right, with the steering wheel too.
Exactly. It's got that.
So that was kind of like for its time. That was kind of a big deal.
Yeah. And what car did you drift? No pun intended. To racing.
I like the RX-7 as well for the same reason.
Dang, we're like on the same wavelength.
Same wavelength. Yep.
All right. So, any of you guys have any thoughts on the game?
I actually only ever touched the PlayStation version. I never saw it on the Saturn.
I probably wouldn't blame you. I think it's not rare, but it's really uncommon. I don't see it very often.
About the same game though, PlayStation to Saturn. I've seen like side by sides, and it's almost you can't tell the difference.
For me, I've never actually gotten to play the Need for Speed, and I was after Overdriving because it's another one of those oddball, really rare variant ones, and I'm just trying to collect all the rare versions of discs for the archive project. One thing I've noticed in Japan is that they'll put out like a special edition of something, and it'll come with a ton of pack-ins, like little toys or keychains or phone cards, but it'll end up being that they'll push out a normal edition that doesn't have any of that extra stuff in it, and in the end they mass produce the special edition and do very limited runs of the normal edition, making the normal edition the actual rare version to get. And that was the case with this game.
I heard a lot of that with a lot of the greatest hits ones, that they had a lot of low print ones, but it's actually kind of funny because a lot of people actually avoid those versions because of that. And it makes me think if there's any cases where those greatest hits or the single reprint releases are actually worth more than the original print runs.
In this case, it wasn't even like a reprint. It was just that they did two versions, one with all the extra stuff and one without. And yeah, almost no one, I guess, bought, or they didn't print out very many of the... I think GTR had, or Overdrive had the keychain in its, like the more common version, and the other one, like the more common version has a double CD case, and the regular, and I'm using my quote fingers here, the regular edition was just a single disc case, no frills to it at all, completely different serial number, and it is not an easy find. But even when you do find it, because it's a driving game, right? It's not, generally speaking, driving games are not commanding, hundreds of dollars. I think I paid $15 for a copy when it finally showed up on eBay.
Mm-hmm. Funny side note is that the U.S. copy, the title is actually Road and Track Presents The Need for Speed. So it was like a magazine, right? That was like a they had to use like an endorsement from a magazine or something. I don't know. I just thought that was weird because they dropped that.
It's kind of funny because now Need for Speed is a huge franchise.
I know. It's like
at least
EA's
it was
flagship, or was, yeah. Another one of the few EA games that was actually good on Saturn.
All right, so let's move on to VR Virtua Racing, aka the worst game I've ever played in my life on the Genesis.
No. Oh, yeah, on the Genesis.
Yeah, I stuck with the 32X version. That one was pretty good.
You know, this game is cheap, and it's got that going for it. So if you're sorting on eBay low to high, it might be one of the first ones that comes up. And you think, because it's cheap, does it suck? And I would say the answer is no. I would say this game, actually, if you can get past the fact that it's all flat shaded polys, it has a lot. That. You can get past that. It has a lot to offer. Let me tell you, it has several different vehicle classes that you can race through. And you actually have to start at the go-kart level, just like you would if you were a kid and you were interested in pursuing racing as a career. You start out doing go-karting, you move up to the next level and the next level, and you progress, and you race coupes, and then you race, F1 cars and stuff like that. So the tracks are really great. I think the tracks are well designed. The music is great. What's there? I mean, what is there was Takanobu Mitsuyoshi composed, but the only part that I don't like is that it only plays at the checkpoints, and then it kind of like fades out, and then you just got that hum of the engine. So it's got some things, it's got some drawbacks for sure, but I feel like for the like $10 or $15 for this game, even the US, like a boxed US copy, it's worth it.
How's the performance compared to all the other versions?
Oh man, it's the best. Well, here's the thing. First of all, it's Time Warner. Nobody wanted to port it over, but Time Warner's like, well, we want to make a racing game, so can we have this license? And I guess they made promises, and Sega agreed to allow them, and so I think they did a decent job. It performs really good compared to like the 32X version or the Genesis version. I mean, the Genesis was using that like SVP chip or something, so obviously. But
the arcade version.
Well, it's been a long time since I've played the arcade version, but I have played that port to the PS2, like the Sega Ages version, and I like the Saturn version even better than that. I don't know, the Saturn version feels solid, and I've done a lot of playthroughs. Dean Burgess from the Junkyard and I were going back and forth on the arcade track, and I was in cockpit mode, and we were just shaving milliseconds off of our time, just back and forth. It's so fun. I couldn't stop playing the game literally just because it feels so good. So despite the graphics maybe not being up to par to other games, that track and many of the other ones just feel so tight. Like you really can get into it. Yeah, I like it a lot.
All right. Any final thoughts?
I'll have to take a look into it and see if I would prefer it over the 32X version.
It's worth noting that Time Warner Interactive, while they didn't do much on the Saturn, a lot of what they did was kind of considered quality, right? Like, they did Tarumaru.
I was just thinking of that. Yep,
right.
and they only shipped 7,500 copies before they shut their doors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the other stuff they did was like Primal Rage and Last Gladiators, but the fact that some these games that are attributed to them and are not, for the most part, are not games that people are going to go and say they're seeking out, right? They're 2 or 3 racing games, a pinball game, and like a port of Primal Rage. I think they're involved in as well. All right, so the last of our normal, and I'm using again the quote fingers, 3D style racing games is F1 Challenge.
Is this me again?
This is you again.
All right, this is gonna be my last one, and then I gotta bail. But Chaz can take over for me. You got my back.
Right, I'll sit in with Pat. I need the education on this anyway.
I gotcha. So we'll go over those.
Well, anyway, so F1 Challenge. Here's another cheap game. Here's another one that's gonna come up down on the list. If you're sorting low to high, if you're thinking of getting this game, it's good. It's It depends on your expectations. First of all, it's not like a boring F1 racer. It definitely has like a Sega arcadey kind of style to it, so they do bring that. But I popped it in recently, kind of comparing it to VR Virtua Racer, and to be honest with you, it's not as good as I remember it being. There are some things that you can do. You can change like you can change the wing, the aerodynamics. You can, put more gas in your vehicle or less if you want to be faster. But the main thing is, if you even try to pit stop, it completely ruins your chance at first place. So you pretty much just have to put hard tires and just go I don't know if it's like 8 laps or something like that, and last until the end. But towards the end, your car just gets squirrely and everything like that, and you start floating around because your tires are pretty much shot. And so at the end, it becomes a struggle to control the vehicle and keep it on the track so that you can cross that finish line in first place.
If you want any shot at first place, you can't go to the pit stop, essentially.
Basically. The dude from Classic Game Room, he did a review on it, and that's the exact thing that he found with it, is like there's no point in the pit stop even being there, because even if you take a pit stop, you're going to lose. So you just put on the hard tires, race through the course about 6 times with a car that feels semi-normal, and then by the 6th lap, your car just starts getting all squirrely, and you basically have to run 2 more laps where you feel like you're just completely out of control. And then you hope that you come in first. But that said, the graphics are pretty good. The music is really good, and it's super cheap. So it's not like gonna break the bank. But yeah.
Wasn't there a interesting feature, I think, of the Japanese version?
Yeah, it's called Live Information, F1 Challenge Live Information, and it's got Japanese play-by-play commentary kind of thing, going on. So I guess if I was Japanese and I could understand it fluently, that would mean something to me. But it doesn't have the music, though. And the soundtrack on this game is actually pretty good. I was actually humming it the other day when I popped it in. So I was like, oh yeah, the music is one of the better things about the game.
I guess I'll definitely have to get it. I want to try it. In all honesty, I've never played it before, but now you guys got me interested with this whole racing without a pit stop and having your wheels basically about to fall off.
Yeah, it gets frustrating though too when other people passing you up and you're like, I just ran this course perfectly for 6 laps, but now all of a sudden, like, my car's just not handling for me anymore.
Get good, son.
Get good. You mentioned music, David. Just before you go, are any of these games? Do any of them use Redbook audio?
Let me think. Yeah, so VR Virtua Racing uses Redbook audio, which is why. Okay, so that's like failed potential to me. That game, like what is there is so good. I actually on our YouTube channel and on our page, I actually did a mashup, like my own little remix of the music, and put it up there with some of the other video game music that we have. And Takenouga Mitsuyoshi, he did a really good job on that music. And then all you get is like these little like clip sections of it. You pass a checkpoint and you get like 30 seconds of music, and then it fades out. And then you're like, and until the next checkpoint. And then it like some new music starts playing. And it is Redbook audio. Like, it's not the Saturn chip. But yeah, it's just like they missed why did they do that? And everybody I know says the same thing. Even Simon was like, God, I sure wish they would play more of that awesome music. So,
yeah. Well, at least you can rip it from the disc.
True, but I mean, again, it's recorded tiny little clips. Like it'll be kind of like a verse and part of a chorus, and then it fades out, and you're like, "Where's the rest of the song?"
Is it on the disc itself, or does it fade out anyway?
I think it fades out anyway, which is why I had to basically take the tracks into Audacity and like cut together like a remix version.
That's exactly
of them.
what I was thinking. Get the original files, recut them together.
I did. So take a look on our Shiro page. It should be either on that or on our YouTube channel. You can find it. And I did the best I could, but I think it's great. Anyway, it was fun, you guys. It really was. And
this felt much better than the last time we attempted it.
And Claire and Hickman, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm so excited about the future of what we're going to do. So
it's going to be extreme.
Yeah.
All right, see ya.
So when we first were compiling the list, I mean, I didn't even put in any of the dishonorable mentions, right? So there's still a buttload of, games that we're not talking about that are racers on the Saturn. We can move them all into another cast, and
we'll have to find another obscure game, but I don't think we'll have an issue with that.
Obscure racers, there's easy. I'm thinking Gala Racer. Not even having played it, just because, like, have you seen that game?
I've seen it, but I haven't played it. I want to get a copy.
I have no idea what it is, but I'll burn it and play it.
If you buy like a legit version, like the deluxe version of that game, comes with like a little toy car or model car you can put together or something.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. So it made me interested in getting that. I don't have one, but anyway.
All right, guys. So that's about as many racing games as we can cram into this episode. But don't fret, we got a couple more racing episodes that we're going to give to you, and we'll mention a lot more games that we missed. I know that we really want to talk about a lot of the two-wheel racers. I know that Kay's dying to do Road Rash, and of course, the most infamous and best racer on the Sega Saturn, Sonic R. So that will be at a later date, but we'll go through it, we'll riff it, we'll play it, and we'll let you know. But for closing notes, I'd like to remind everyone that Chaz is going to be having his Panzer Dragoon Saga stream on Sundays at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
For people who are, tuning into that, you're actually stopping your play and playing at scheduled times each week so that people can keep tuning in and see the entire gameplay.
That's correct. Yes, I've made a schedule and I'm going to stick to it.
Awesome.
Cool. I'd also like to plug both Peter and Claire's articles that they've released, and you can currently view them on our Podium page. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I gotcha. So definitely check those out. And we also would like to plug our Facebook group, not page, our group where you can join and discuss our podcast with other people, or you can just talk Saturn in general. And it's that's going to be facebook.com/groups/Sega Saturn Shiro, or just search Sega Saturn Shiro under groups. And we'll approve you up there if you're human, of course. And then that way you can get into the group, talk to us, talk to any other group members, ask questions, and do whatever you want that's Saturn related. And that'll be a lot of fun.
Definitely.
Yeah. So is there anything I'm missing?
Did we mention that my run is on the Sega Saturn Shiro Facebook page?
Oh, yes. Chaz's run will be on our Facebook page, of course, which it always will be. And we'll share that to a bunch of other groups so you won't miss it. But if you don't want to miss it, make sure to like us on Facebook and make sure that you have us in your notifications, and you will not miss a single stream. And that's going to be at 5 o'clock p.m. on Sundays, Eastern Standard Time.
Yeah, I think that covers it.
Alright, so from everybody here at Sega Saturn Shiro, we wish you a good night, and you must watch Chaz's stream. You must read Peter and Claire's articles. You must join our Facebook discussion group, and most importantly, you must play Sega Saturn.
1, 2, 3, pull! Go! Here we go! Here we go! Here we go! D-A-U-O-O-S. U-U-S-A. Okay, go, man. Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go. This is a cool cheat because it's really tough, but it's a beautiful day, so good luck. And we're on the way, yes, we're on the way, and it's a beautiful day here at Daytona. You're falling way behind, try to make a hole through there. You're looking all over the track, let them see some control. There's a crash coming out turn 3, you better watch yourself. Somebody coming up behind you, somebody coming up behind. Watch out! Step left, go!